Westminster Abbey. Burial place to most kings and queens of England. You've been there on a school trip, or with mum and dad, but I bet you didn't know that there is one king in Westminster Abbey in his coffin who might still be perfectly preserved. My name is Daniel Havisage, and you're watching History Unearthed. If you ever find yourself in Westminster Abbey, and you walk all the way around the shrine of Edward the Confessor, you'll see that there's a very curious tomb. All the other kings, like well-to-do medieval lords, have their effigies, but there is one tomb that looks austere, it looks blackened. There is no effigy, there's just an inscription: Advardus primus, scatorium maleus hicest, pactum serva. Here lies Edward I, Hammer of the Scots, keep the vow. Now Edward I is a controversial king. He conquered Wales, he almost conquered all of Scotland. In 1290, Edward expelled all Jews from England. This remained in place until Oliver Cromwell's resettlement of the Jews in the 1650s. This guy was a ruthless warrior king. You know, when you think of all these warrior kings, you think of Richard the Lionheart, William the Conqueror. Edward I was actually right up there. And just to paint you an image of this guy, he had these classic Plantagenet drooping eyes. You can see these in most of his portraits. He towered over everyone else. At 6'2" or 188 centimetres, he was called Edward Longshanks. In a time when the king was meant to be a warrior, a leader for the country, this guy really looked the part. So he was a powerful and feared king, and he was buried in Westminster Abbey. Edward reigned for 34 years and 7 months. Of course, all this greatness, all this fierceness, cannot last forever. Edward had all of these names, but he was just another mortal man. So at the age of 68, Edward died on the 7th of July, 1307, in Cumbria. He was actually on the way to complete a Scottish campaign and to keep hammering the Scots. And there are rumours that arose afterwards that Edward actually charged his son to keep carrying his body off to Scotland whenever he went on campaign there. Now, unluckily for Edward I, his son proved to be a much worse king. Edward II did not in fact go on a campaign to Scotland. Instead, he did manage to lose the throne. Now about 450 years pass. We fast forward to Georgian Britain. In 1770, an absolute madman, Daines Barrington, proposes to open the king's tomb. So Edward dies, and like many of his predecessors, he is taken to Westminster Abbey with a procession, and he's buried there. Now the story afterwards is a bit complicated. For about 450 years, Edward stayed at Westminster Abbey, apparently undisturbed, although there are rumours that his successors actually issued orders in accordance with his wishes to keep on reopening his tomb and to actually replenish the wax around him. I mean, this would have actually led to a remarkable state of preservation, essentially mummifying the king. And no, we're not in ancient Egypt, this is medieval England. Now we get to Georgian Britain, 1770. The Danes and another guy, they tried to convince the Dean of Westminster Abbey to let them have a peek into the tomb. I'm sure this will go well with the priest, right? Well, it actually does. And in 1774, the tomb is actually opened. And why did they want to do this? And why were they asking? It goes back to my earlier point, where there were curious little bits of information. Supposed documents dating back to the reigns of Edward III, who was actually the grandson of Edward I, and Henry IV, who was saying that they made payments for the renewal of the wax around King Edward's body. I mean, does it get any better than this? The Georgians were thinking, okay, well, we could open up this tomb and maybe we could find an intact king. And you know, all other evidence actually points to this. Edward's tomb, as I've shown you, was very barren, plain, easy to open. There's nothing overcomplicating the tomb itself. There's no effigy that you have to worry about. You just lift the lid off, and there you go. The coffin is inside. So this is where something remarkable happens. This is how they describe the course of events. On lifting up the lid of the tomb, the royal body was found wrapped in a strong and thick linen cloth, waxed on the inside. The head and the face were covered with a sudarium, a face cloth of crimson sarsenet, wrapped to 3 folds, comfortable on the napkin used by our Saviour in his way to crucifixion. To them, like with an Egyptian mummy, they start unwrapping the whole thing. They decide to peek underneath the cerecloth. They continue. On flinging open the external mantle, the corpse was discovered and all the ensigns of majesty richly inhabited. The body was wrapped in fine linen cerecloth, closely fitted to every part of the body, even to the very fingers and face. Over the cerecloth was a tunic of red silk damask. Above that, a stool of thick white tissue crossed the breast, and on this, at 6 inches distant from each other, quatrefoils or filigree work of gilt metal set with stones imitating rubies, sapphires, amethysts, and etc. The corpse from the waist downwards was covered with a rich cloth of figured gold, which fell down to the feet and was tucked beneath them. On the back of each hand was a quatrefoil, like those on the stool. In the king's right hand was a sceptre with a cross of copper gilt and of elegant workmanship reaching to the right shoulder. In the left hand was the rod and dove, which passed over the shoulder and reached to the ear. The dove stood on a bull placed on 3 ranges of oak leaves of enamelled green. The dove was of white enamel. On the head was a crown chased with trefoils made of gilt metal. The head itself, and we'll get into the good part, was lodged in the cavity of the stone coffin, always observable in those receptacles of the dead. The corpse was dressed in conformity with ancient usage, even as early as the time of Saxon Siebert. If we go back to the renewal of the wax, we do think that it was the cerecloth that was changed and continuously renewed. So just look him in the face. That's Edward I, preserved for almost 500 years. His body was practically untouched. It was almost a time capsule. The clothings, the ornaments, the regalia, it was all in there. And when the king was finally revealed, it looked like time hadn't fully done its job. So while the Hammer of the Scots died in 1307, part of him physically was still there in 1774. So this was a case where a king of England from the 14th century was disturbed and became literally face to face with them. Thank you for watching this first episode on my channel. I'm going to upload every single week, so please hit the subscribe button, like, comment, share this with your mum, with anyone, put this on Twitter, just whatever you do, get the video out there. So, I'll be coming with another mystery next year. So, I'll be coming with another mystery next week. Until then, adios.